Hello, everybody. Welcome to the job search series. We're just going to give it another minute before we get started. Alrighty, in the interest of time, we're going to get started. My name is Nicole Locke. I am an academic neonatologist at the University of Maryland School of Medicine in Baltimore, Maryland. I'm the current education chair of TCAN, and I'm really excited to be bringing you the job search series again this year. Just a few background things to make sure that everybody has a great time with this series. We are going to be using the Q&A feature to submit questions. Please feel free to submit questions throughout. We'll get those answered. We are going to have a presentation first from Dr. Emily Carter, and then we will have a panelist can go through some questions. Please keep yourself muted on this Zoom. Please reach out to the moderator, which is me, for any questions or concerns. This webinar is going to be recorded. It's going to be posted to our TCAN YouTube page. And then I ask if you could please give us feedback using this QR code. Today, I'm excited to tell you and introduce our didactic speaker for today, who is Emily Carter. She did medical school at the Oregon Health and Science University, her residency at Stanford, and her fellowship back at OHSU. She is currently practicing in Oregon at OHSU and Peace Health Southwest as a fellowship program director. We're really excited to hear from her today. Again, she's going to give a little talk, and then we'll get to our panel. Thank you so much, Dr. Locke and TCAN. Let me get this set up for everybody. And we'll get started. So thanks for inviting me here today, along with this incredible panel of academic neonatologists to talk to you about shaping a career in academic neonatology. As you just heard, I am Emily, and I'm the program director at OHSU, which is in Portland, Oregon, and I'm so excited to be here today. My favorite part of my job is mentorship, and I love opportunities to meet young neonatologists during these nerve-wracking but exciting moments of career transition. The intention of this presentation is to serve as a brief overview of academic neonatology and the areas that are important for you all to consider when you are interviewing and planning your next steps and career in medicine. Although many of you see us, your attendings, working in the NICU, the off-service work and life can be opaque for many, making it difficult to compare jobs and understand what life will look like after training. So, what exactly is academic neonatology? I was considering this question as I was preparing this talk. I think at its core, academic neonatology provides an opportunity to impact the care we provide patients away from the bedside. While the clinical care of babies and their families remain the center of an academic career, it is enhanced by the other jobs, roles, or interests that we each have in academic medicine, and these roles are supported by the mission of an academic institution. During this part of the presentation, my goal is to show you the ways in which an institution can support these non-clinical roles and also the expectations that may become a part of your job. So why did we, the panelists and myself and all of your attendings, choose academics? I think this is an important question for you to be asking those people because each of us will have different answers. It's probably also important to say that many of these things can also be found in certain private practice models, but I think there is a separate talk being given by somebody who practices in private practice and can speak to that. I doubt that anyone will tell you that academics is the easier path in neonatology, but instead that you can build a career around the things that you care about. This is a list of some of the reasons that I hear people talk about and some of the reasons that I chose academics. And that's really the variety of the work. It changes daily. It's not limited to clinical practice. Teaching and mentorship for me in particular was very important, and for many of the people here. The ability to improve systems through QI work, access to subspecialty expertise, often, not always, but often only available at larger academic centers. And often these are the quaternary care centers that provide care for the most complex clinical cases, such as ECMO, fetal surgery, and other super subspecialized care. There also is a lot of career flexibility over time in academics, whereas your life outside of the hospital changes. Also, the how you build your professional career can change, and then opportunities to build a niche and expertise, potentially even a national name for yourself in some area. So, understanding the work week of an academic neonatologist is challenging because no 2 weeks are the same. I broke down the four most common commitments an average academic neonatologist would have as a part of their career. So, for most, the core of our job remains clinical service. Between institutions, there can be a significant amount of variability in the expectations from the number of weeks a faculty works to even what is defined as a clinical work week. So there are different oversight models as well, working with fellows or residents or mostly APPs. And call requirements can vary from patient call to at-home call. And none of this is black and white or very easily comparable between institutions and can be challenging to understand. So, just as an example, at OHSU, where I work, 1.0 FTE is 16 weeks of clinical service. But for us, 1 week is seven 24/7, like a 24/7 work week. So 7 days of work with a home call included. This is in contrast to an example that one of my colleagues gave me of his former employer, where 1 week was counted as a Monday through Friday, no holidays work week with in-house call on top of that. So although on paper, these two institutions may look like they both work 16 clinical weeks, what that actually means for your life can be quite different. Teaching also varies from trainee supervision and running rounds on service to giving lectures or to trainees at all levels, providing simulation support. The meetings and institutional service can be quantified in hours of weekly meetings, committee involvement, and professional societies. And then protected time is the thing that you guys probably hear about the most. It's your FTE buy down. And these are roles in research, leadership, and education that provide salary funding by either the institution or from grants. So to get a little bit into that, what is the academic job math? So based on those four pillars, it's important to understand the math of a job description. Although many of us think of the model of physician scientist in blue, most academic neonatologists are not NIH-funded scientists. These are researchers who spend, in general, 25% of their time or less on clinical care and 75% of time on research. But here are some examples of roles that have FTE buy down or protection in academic medicine in green and pink that are not traditional researchers. The important thing to see is that these are still primary clinician roles, and that even if a certain role doesn't have protected FTE for one of those pillars, there's still an expectation that these individuals are doing some of the work in that area. So, for example, most physician scientists are teaching either by mentoring in the lab or rounding on the teaching team. And these are roles that are an expected part of all academic jobs. And the FTE comes with like the leadership roles or the exterior grants. So this is another list of some administrative roles that often come with protected time at an academic institution or a stipend or a path towards leadership. There are many, many other administrative tasks in a division, all of which we share. And I kind of think of these as more like family chores. They're the things that keep the division running. These are not necessarily have protected FTE or pay allocations, but they're instead an expectation of being a part of the division. I also think that this is not unique to academic medicine. It's part of entering the job world. Not everything has a specific time value to it, but is part of being a part of your work family. In general, in academics, the hospital will pay you your set salary for being a neonatologist. So this is not significantly different than what you've been experiencing as a trainee. You show up to work and you get paid. But now there's this thing called RVUs that you likely have heard about, but have not directly affected you. So they're really the clinical currency of medicine. I'm not an expert in this area, but what I can tell you about RVUs is it stands for relative value unit. And in general, this is what generates revenue for the hospital. So on average, procedures provide higher RVUs than talking or counseling, even if they require less time, which is why the NICU is a high RVU generating subspecialty in pediatrics. The thing about how we're paid or how the hospital is paid for NICU care is that all NICU-based care is bundled. So doing specific procedures in the NICU does not earn individual RVUs for that are different from one baby to the next, or how much time you spend rounding doesn't make a difference on a day-to-day billing. Delivery care does have some more RVU generating opportunity. And like, why do I bring this up? How could this affect you? Some institutions use RVUs for compensation or bonuses. There are also sometimes productivity expectations, and they can affect the way staffing models are created. And this is in contrast to what is the academic currency, which is really your work products. So these are grants, the scholarship that you're doing, national collaborations, publications that you're putting out, and how this can affect you is really these are expectations for your annual number of there may be expectations for the annual number of publications that you're doing in your academic work. They can create paths to leadership roles and may affect your step promotion for annual salary increases. So asking up front when you're in the interview process about if compensation is RVU based, how it's shared amongst the faculty group. Is there some sort of productivity threshold, both thinking about that in an academic way and in an RVU way? And if teaching is important to you, how that's valued, or advocacy or QI in relation to these things that really have more of a dollar or promotions value attached to them. And since we're talking about promotion, this is a visual depiction of the promotion pathway and the rank that you hear about. And we'll start thinking about very soon. So with some institutions, they start new hires at the instructor level, or some new hires at the instructor level, and others of us, which is true at OHSU, new hires are started at the assistant professor level. On average, faculty spends about 5 to 7 years at each rank before going through promotion, but the details of all of this vary so widely, it's hard to talk about it in a general sense. The timeline is very institution specific. So although I gave you that time period, for some institutions it's much longer, or they allow longer, and others you have a clock in which you have to go through promotion. There's tenure track versus non-tenure track. These have different expectations, security, and pressure. And the clock for each of these things starts as you are hired. So knowing what the review timeline is as you get started is really important, or it can sneak up on you when you have boards and other things that are happening at the beginning of your career. Um, the promotion criteria are also set by an institution. It's not a national standard, which as you're moving, if you're moving to a new institution, can be challenging to find the right mentors to help you sort of figure that out on the early side, because your national mentors and the mentors from your previous program may not be as helpful in that sense. So, asking up front, what does a successful promotion look like here, and what's the typical timeline can be helpful for strategizing about your career. So thinking about academic neonatology beyond just the children's hospital, academic systems often include community affiliates, regional campuses, and level 2 and level 3 NICUs, which we were actually just talking about before we got started here. Most academic groups have outreach sites, and some of us have really robust teleneonatology coverage that operate outside of the academic institution. The bottom line about academic is that it is really about the mission, not specifically the clinical practice environment. And community NICUs can carry academic appointments, and many academic neonatologists also work as a part of their contract in community NICUs. So, asking about how that's balanced with research infrastructure, mentorship, and protected time when you're looking at different jobs. So, in this next step, as you're preparing to apply, when you're thinking about an institution, it's important that when you're preparing your application, that you show that you've researched their mission, understand their NICU model and academic priorities, and then think about what you bring to that institution, the specific skills, track record, or project that fits in their gaps in that institution, and talk about what you want to build. Describe the programs, the research, the culture that you want to create. And as you're doing all of this, you're going to start thinking and being asked a lot about your academic niche. So, an important place to start is just reflecting on your own fellowship scholarship. What have you enjoyed? And does the institution that you're interviewing at have mentors in this area? Also, talking to your mentors about their path. Reach out to loose connections, the people that you meet at meetings, the program director from your residency that you are not in fellowship at. Identifying people with jobs that you think you would like to have, not to ask them for jobs, but to think about what they have done, what their pathway has been like. And people love talking about themselves, and most of us love mentoring. And so these are easy conversations to have and to set up, and people enjoy them very much. And then start saying yes to things as you start your faculty position, but not too often. Consider how individual opportunities relate to your overall goals. And I know some of these panelists have things to say about this. And reflect on the opportunity costs of saying yes. If you say yes to this role, what might you not have time for when the next role comes around? So I hope that this brief overview has given you more questions to consider as you start looking at jobs. This slide is just highlights some of the important variations at each institution, all of which we've talked about, and how those will impact your day-to-day work life. So in thinking about the clinical work, asking questions about what service looks like, and night and weekend call, as those will affect your outside of life professional or non-professional life more probably than the day-to-day work in the NICU. And then also what kind of support there is in the NICU, what the census is like, what the APP support is like. For academics, thinking about the promotion pathway, since nobody can help you except those that are inside the institution, to understand really what that specific expectation will look like for you. Thinking about the mentorship that's provided there, and how scholarship is defined. Like for us now, advocacy has been given a pillar in our promotion pathway, which probably isn't true at other places. So QI and advocacy are a really important part of our development as faculty. And if that's important to you, looking for institutions that support that. Protected time for your scholarship and additional research infrastructure like biostatistics work or uh, amount of money to start up your research when you do start on faculty. And finally, I think something that we often don't talk about enough, but as a new grad in 2019 that was suddenly left with the only people I interacted with were my colleagues for a number of years during COVID. I think that the culture is incredibly important. And some of the things that you can talk to faculty about is why do people stay at this institution and why do they leave? And what has burnout looked like for faculty in the faculty roles that they're in. So that is the end of the overview, and I hope that you guys have a lot of questions for all the faculty that are here, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions for me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. That was an excellent overview. At this time, I am just going to introduce all of our panelists as well, and then we'll get started on some questions. Again, please feel free to use that Q&A section to ask any questions that you have. We have some that were prepared ahead of time. Thank you to anybody who submitted a question ahead of time, but we'll get going now. So I just wanted to introduce all of our panelists today. So, oops, apologies. First, I'm going to introduce Dr. Christy Bruno. Dr. Bruno went to medical school at the University of New England College of Osteopathic Medicine. She did her residency down in Philly at Thomas Jefferson University, her fellowship at CHOP. She currently practices in Yale, Connecticut at School of Medicine, and her current roles are program director of the Neonatal Perinatal Medicine Fellowship Program. Next, we have John Flabat. He did medical school in Harvard. His residency was at CHOP and fellowship is at CHOP and decided it seems he wants to stay there. So he currently still practices at CHOP. He's an associate director of the pediatric residency and an associate director of the neonatal fellowship. Oops, sorry. Next, we have Morgan Hill. Morgan did medical school at the University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. She did her residency and fellowship at CHOP, and she currently practices in Cincinnati at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. She is an assistant professor of pediatrics and associate program director of the NICU Fellowship Program, and she's also a clerkship director for the fourth year medical student NICU elective. And then we also have Beanie Meadow with us today. For medical school, she went to the University of Chicago, Pritzker School of Medicine. She did residency at CHOP. Her fellowship was done at Northwest. In addition, she did a clinical medical ethics program at the same time. She currently practices at the University of Michigan, and she's an associate program director for the Neonatal Perinatal Medicine Fellowship Program.
I'm actually the real program director now.
Oh, congratulations. My bad. The website was not updated.
I should tell them.
But now I'm going to get started with a question for the panelists, and I will call on you to make it less awkward unless there's something that you want to jump in when I have a question. But first, I'm going to actually start. I'll start with you, Beanie. Tell us a little bit about how you decided to get into academic medicine, and what is kind of your path that has gotten you where you are. And then we'll go around to the other panelists as well.
I came in highly biased because my dad was a neonatologist at the University of Chicago and the program director there for 20 some odd years. So like the path of academic neonatology was definitely the one that had been modeled for me. But for me, the biggest difference between academic and private practice and the reason why academic was like really where I wanted to go was medical education. And in the formal sense, like I did at some point envision myself becoming part of program leadership, but I really, really, really like teaching at the bedside. And one of my attendings when I was a fellow said that if I tried to work in a private practice, they would fire me because I would do too much teaching and the nurse practitioners would revolt. So that was, which I don't think is true. Nurse practitioners like teaching. But the idea of doing kind of formal education and didactics and being really involved with learners was extremely important to me. So that's the main way that I got into academics.
Awesome. Christy, can you answer the same question?
Sure. Similar to what Beanie's describing, like I really just always loved from the beginning, like, being around trainees, being around, watching their, getting their first procedures, getting their first glimpses of, understanding physiology and neonatology and everything. And it just really sort of continued from there. Really working at the residency level, working with the residents has always been a joy of mine, and then and with the students as well. And being a part of the fellowship program where I trained, there was so much education and so much simulation and studying resuscitation, studying procedural skills that really was something that I enjoyed so much during my training that I wanted to continue to see that grow and blossom during my early attendingship and beyond. So.
Awesome. How about you, John?
Yeah, I think similar themes. I will say neonatology was a total surprise. I was terrified of infants through most of med school, and then I did a sub-I in the NICU and really loved it, and so that kind of got me on the path of neonatology. But I had always been intrigued by the idea of engaging in knowledge discovery, and so academic medicine was something that I was interested in from the beginning. And initially, my time in the field was defined with sort of neuro-based research, and that was done for the first, I don't know, maybe 10 years of my attending career. And in conjunction with that, I sort of pivoted more towards medical education over time. Not because of disinterest in the neurospace, but it was just sort of a growing interest as I sort of spent more and more time as an attending and faculty member. I will say that when I was in training, there was not quite as well honed of a path in medical education as there is now. And so I think that as that became more of a defined direction, it felt like when I was at the end of fellowship, most of the people that led the programs were researchers, and they had labs and other things. And so I think that my initial focus in that domain was in part because I knew that I wanted to have some role in shaping the future neonatologist. So, and I will say, Christy was a great teacher when I was an intern, and she supervised my first intubation. So when she said that she really enjoyed supervising people's procedures, I can personally attest to her skill with that, as I remember vividly. So thank you, Christy.
I remember that really well, John. We still talk about it. And now look at him.
Man, that's special. That's pretty cool. Um, Next, Morgan.
I similarly really love medical education, but I'm not just going to talk about that because I think otherwise I'm going to repeat everything that everyone just said. I really am also interested in just academic medicine in general because I think similar to John, what you said, just being around people who want to advance the field and learning and just really being kind of completely surrounded by that all the time, I think is really inspiring. I love, right, being part of neonatology grand rounds and seeing all the things that's happening and things that people are doing. And then outside of that too, I just really like the balance that this job affords me. I really like clinical care and medicine and taking care of babies, but I also really like that my time when I'm not providing clinical care looks very different, and I am never bored. I'm always doing something different. I have many different hats that I wear and different, things that I do, and I love that. I really like the balance. I love all the different opportunities that I have, and so I think that's nice. And it also is not just balance within work, right, of all the different things that I'm doing, but it affords me a lot of work-life balance and a kind of more flexible schedule outside of work too, I think in a way that sometimes I don't know that I'd have if I was in private practice. So it kind of is the best of all worlds for me.
Awesome. Thank you. Emily, I was going to see if you wanted to finish us out. I know you talked a little bit about your thoughts about it, but if you have anything else to say.
Yeah, I reflecting on this, being in Portland, I think the other thing is that people didn't talk about is what, as you get closer to making decisions about your forever job, you're thinking about a lot more than just your professional life. And we were, I'm from Portland, my family was here, and we were pretty committed to staying. And so I looked at both academic and non-academic jobs. And um, my colleague who looked over these slides was the one that was clear to point out that you can find some of these things in non-academic positions. I think the part that's harder is the mentorship and the teaching of fellows, at least. I think that some of them, you can have medical students and residents in some of those. For us, like Kaiser, or we have another level 4 NICU that is doesn't have fellows but has family medicine residents, I think, rotate through there. And so you can get some of that. But it was definitely a it would have been a regionally made decision instead of a professional decision. And I also spent a lot of time. I probably my hardest year of training was my MPH. I know MPHs aren't always really challenging, but I was in epi and biostatistics, and I had committed a lot of time to that work. And I didn't really want to give up all of those skills that I had gained. And although that's not front and center in my day-to-day life anymore, it has really, I think, would have been harder to use a lot of those skills in a non-academic center where we're really all the being surrounded by people, researchers, and talking about research all the time in all kinds of different aspects. So those are some of the additional reasons that I thought about a career where I could balance all of those different things.
Awesome. Thank you. I think this has really brought up a bunch of different themes that I wanted to try to encompass today with our panelists. The first one I'm going to jump right in is to the work-life balance. We got a question from somebody submitted from the registration about, how can you have work-life balance as an academic neonatologist? Because quote, their attendings were very stressed. And I think that you guys have kind of highlighted how your job might look a little different. You have more meetings or stress for those things, but can anybody else talk about kind of how they handle their work-life balance and what they think has been a benefit in the career path they've chosen? I know Morgan already talked about this, so maybe I can jump to Christy.
Um, as far as work-life balance, I feel like at different times, like it does, to talk about what Morgan said, like it does afford some flexibility at times, more so than like when I contrast it with my husband, who's like a fully private practice physician. Like I'm the more flexible one. Like when we kind of look at that, which is it depends on the time though, right? It depends, like when you're on service, when you're on a busy time, then obviously there's a give and take, right, at different times. But I definitely do enjoy that there's flexibility in that. I actually do some clinic as well. So I do like 30% of my clinical time is actually the follow-up clinic, which is something that I've actually I love the acute care, but it's actually balanced my life a bunch since I've been, moving on in my career. It's just there, and so there are times, and you really do find like you work with a lot of different people, and you we work with each other, and things are important at different times, like you would in a private practice. Like you cover for each other, you find the right people. If you're willing to give and be in to help people, others will be willing to do the same for the most part. Um, but I do enjoy that collaborative, those collaborative discussions, those the journal clubs, the case discussions. That's something that will which I continue to value through my career. Um, Yeah, but the balance at times it's it's tough in different ways. Like I look at Beanie with her baby now, like it's tough in different ways. You have your your kids and you're getting through it at at different times, and then they need you in different ways as they get older, and they the all the after school things and the sports, and I think for me really finding that like reliable childcare was everything, so that I could be present at work and have my head clear when I was there, so I was fully in, especially being having a physician partner as a sort of that balance. But we made it work, and we paid a lot for childcare, and we made sure our kids were safe, and I think that that really allowed me to have my head clear when I was in the unit and taking care of patients and really being present.
Awesome. John, do you have anything to add?
Um, I don't know. I think that the thing that I would say is it's like such a personal thing. It's hard to make broad statements about what works for any one of us, in part because, what works in one month or another month or one phase of life is going to be different. I think some of the advantage of being in a system where you have the opportunity to create different mixes of responsibilities that confer advantages and disadvantages together is one that I have appreciated over time because it's not just one sort of approach. So I think that some of what Christy said nicely demonstrates that with, whether it's the clinic or some of the administrative time, like everybody, like eventually everyone works. And so like they'll get the time out of you in some ways, but I think that how that time is spent is a choice that is largely in our own hands. And so that's, I think, how I've worked on that over the years.
Awesome. Emily or Beanie, did you guys have anything to add to that?
I completely agree with John. It's just very, very personal. So this is my second small child in 2 years. It's been fine. People have covered for me when I've been on maternity leave. I am program director, and my APD just stepped in for 12 weeks, which is great. Um, but I think the flexibility, not just in terms of scheduling, but also in terms of like when do you want to do your hours? So like I can very easily do things at any time, and no one is kind of um, making sure that I'm working 9 to 5. So if my kid has something fun during the day, I can go do it. But also like the intensity with which you throw yourself at your non-academic pursuits is up to you. So one of my colleagues was really heavily into a research project, had a baby, came back and said, I'm not going to stay here until 7 anymore doing this project. And that's okay. So her project is going more slowly now, but she's still being productive. I definitely have seen a difference in my kind of working in pajama time before and after having kids, where I used to come home and my husband would watch TV and I'd just be working on the computer. And now I don't do that because I'm hanging out with my kids. But like that's okay. I'm not in an institution that's up or out in terms of promotion. So like there is no fixed clock on when I need to get things done. I probably will get promoted in like a reasonable timeline, but it's not going to be right on the 5 year dot. And that's fine.
Did you have anything, Emily?
My only other thing to say is that I also had a parent that was in academic medicine. And I think the thing that I learned from her is that this is a marathon. Like, if you're planning on having a 40-year career in medicine, I think academics allows that time frame where you can have the moments of like really sprinting for something, and then you can step back a little bit and focus on other parts of your career or other parts of your life. But I also think you need to find the institution that fits that for you. I don't think all institutions will afford you that. And I have found a home where that is very much true, but I don't think that all of my colleagues across academic medicine would necessarily say the same thing. So I don't think they all fit into the same box necessarily. Or even I would say even within our own institution, the same divisions, other divisions are the same way. It really is pretty specific. And I think that trying to use your interview time and reflecting on your fellowship interviews, all of those things, and the people that you connected with, spending time thinking about that it is important, and talking to people about what their experience is like at their work.
Absolutely. All of those are really, really important thoughts. I wanted to jump on to one of the thoughts that was said about different parts of your job. I think sometimes there are some fellowship programs where you work at one hospital, you are really only exposed to that. And I think a lot of academic medicine is different than that. You work at other places, you work at the clinic, you might work at level threes, or would everybody be able to say a little bit about what their experiences is in an academic medicine and how maybe that's different than what you'd expect? I'll start with Emily because I know she works at a level three as well, and maybe to take us through kind of the different aspects.
Yeah, we all of us work at a level 4 at OHSU, which is we are actually housed next to labor and delivery in the adult hospital with a bridge connecting us to Dornbecker Children's Hospital, which is the children's hospital. So that is our structure where we are both the delivery center and the children's hospital in one institution. And then for most of our faculty, half of their clinical time is also spent in Washington across the river. So we have two medical license at Peace Health Southwest, which is a like 16-ish bed level 3 NICU. And we go down to 25 weeks there and have work with only with a nurse practitioner or PA at that hospital. And the other thing is, there used to be another hospital that we had a contract with that we no longer have a contract with. So that was 50 miles away. And that is totally different setup for the people who had or like a part of their contract working there. And that can change over the career of your or trajectory of your career. And I think maybe also states situated like us, like Seattle. I know Seattle a little bit better than other institutions because they are similar to us, where they have lots of spokes to level 2 and level 3 NICUs that they support. But when they lose a contract, everything gets shifted around for everyone.
Awesome. Thank you. What about Morgan?
So I similarly work at a really large academic center that covers really all newborn care in a very large tri-state area. And so I think probably one of the themes that you're going to hear is that like no one person's job looks the same. And so we could each tell you like our very individual, very particular, very niche job description. But really like it's gonna look different no matter where you are. And even within my division, everyone's job looks different because we cover so many different level 2, level 3, and our level 4 NICU. So like I work at one of our very large level 3 NICUs that is a community hospital, but it has an academic affiliation, and I have residents and fellows at my hospital. And I also do some follow-up clinic time where I really am not with trainees as much, right? But we have some people in our division that just do level 4, do level 2, level 4, do level 3, level 2. So it's all different. And all of us probably can tell you that, which I actually think is one of the things that's very, very appealing about our job, both just in academic medicine in general, because, right, you can do different things, get involved in different opportunities and projects, and your clinical time too, not just your non-clinical academic time, but your clinical time can also evolve and change depending on your interests and what you want to do. So my summary is I do level 3 and follow-up clinic, but it's very, very different. If you had different people on this call, you'd be hearing a very different answer.
Absolutely. Agreed. What about you, John?
Yeah, I'd agree with everything Morgan just said. I think that, the large groups afford many different options around where you actually get to practice is probably the best summary of what I would say is that in our group, we have large level 4, we have a level 3, a couple of level 3s, and, well baby, follow-up clinic, and all those things. And so I think that there's, I think the leadership does a nice job of creating alignment between where your practice sites are, along with what your non-clinical interests are, so that you can have sort of contribution that makes sense. And so, as somebody that does a lot with residents and fellows, I generally spend my time in the teaching services. And so that would be in the delivery hospital next door to CHOP, and then on the fellow services at CHOP. But I also have an interest in like surgical population. So about half of my clinical time is co-managing with the surgeons on the surgical team, and then some time in the high-risk delivery environment. So it's kind of, I don't know if you want more details on that, but I think that it would be exactly what Morgan just said, which is like you kind of have this mix of opportunities, and then you can change. And then the nice thing about that is, like, for many years, I wasn't on the resident team over at HUP because of our hospital, University of Pennsylvania next door, because it just wasn't what I was doing. But then as things changed in what I'm doing, like, I changed to that, and it's kind of like learning new aspects of the field again. So I think that it gives a sense of renewal from time to time to be able to shift where you are without having to leave the place and go to someplace different. So.
Absolutely, there can definitely be change within the job, whether it be places change, they add contracts or subtract them, or you get new opportunities. Agreed. Anything to add differently, Christy or Beanie?
No, I would echo what they were just speaking about. Like I do my level 4 time, and then the follow-up clinic, and all of us are required to have privileges at one of our affiliate hospitals, and I and working at that hospital where I cover well baby time at, I think everybody should do some well baby time at some point, just to remember what it's like. And we have a tendency to sort of yeah, make babies have not have problems, but like investigate them more and potentially hold them to higher standards once they enter. So I think it really just getting back to that, I think, is really important. I always talk to the trainees about that. Yes, but the balance that it affords me, like if we wanted to get privileges at another hospital, we would be supported in that. So I think it's wonderful.
We only have one mothership. It's a level 4 with the delivery hospital, and everybody works there. So I'm the outlier here.
Well, again, it's that there's so many different things, and that's something that you really need to ask on an interview. Um, whether that be, early on in your initial conversations or more in depth when you talk to the different attendings when you're doing your interview day about, where they work, what their schedule is like, because that can be really important and can make the job kind of nuanced with what you need. There's a question in the Q&A, which I am not sure of the answer to for any of you. So, did anybody transition jobs in your career?
I did. I I started actually I started, we were talking about how this is like a heavy chop pan, like 'cause some of us, many of us have trained there. But I stayed on as an attending for 1 year in Philadelphia while my husband was finishing up his training, and then I went to New York City. I worked at Montefiore at Einstein for 4 years. Um and I was never leaving New York City. Like, I wanted to go back to New York. I wanted to be there. And it was a different type of job. It was an academic job. I'm sorry. I apologize, guys. Um, it was um it was an academic job that afforded itself. My gosh, this is not a good idea. Sorry. It's like um I'm a it was an academic job. Whoa, this is being recorded. I'm going to restart. This is why doing this at home is not good in the summer, as it's summertime. So, it was an academic job there weren't a lot of, there was a lot of clinical responsibilities. It was busy, and there was teaching, and there were all resident teams in the middle of everything, and it was a really great opportunity to sort of be in the trenches and learn and build up a program. We built an ECMO program there. We built, after coming from Philly, where we had a lot of things that were already like sort of in place. So that was great. And then I ended up being a trailing spouse coming up to Yale after my husband got a job in the Hartford area. And I've been here for a little over 10 years now, which is actually kind of crazy. But it was, you realize like it sort of humbles you at different places. Like every place has their, the things that are important to them, and recognizing that you just have to take it all in. And as much as we try to standardize things, I take things, yeah, obviously we take the clinical work seriously, but you sort of have to go with the flow a bit of some of the things that are important to people at different institutions. But yeah, I tell our fellows too when they look for jobs is that it doesn't have to be your forever job. Just recognizing that every place has their quirks and the things that are really great and the things that are that are areas for improvement. And as much as we try to standardize care, I would never trade the experiences that I've had at different places, because being in New York was like it was everything was so new to me, and it was just it was great because it was a smaller fellowship program, and there were so many newer attendings who were different from different training programs. So it really allowed itself to really, it wasn't always, you don't do it only this way. And it was really a great experience overall. I apologize for that. It's summer and kids are crazy.
That's okay. We understand. I appreciate that answer. And to further go into that, I will say we do actually have a separate panel about transitioning as an early career faculty member. So somebody who is an early career person who decided to transition over. And that panel will be happening in August. So make sure to register and check that out to the person who asked that question. We got another question in the chat. That I was going to ask the group about, if you're really focused on being that, I think, clinical researcher, I would guess that means more of a physician scientist, even though I think all of us are really physician scientists, depending on whatever work you're doing. But would you recommend that you stay at a level 4? Because I think there are some opportunities as well at level 3s, depending on what your academic center is. But I wanted to see your thoughts about that with maybe some of the people who are in your own divisions and what they are able to accomplish at your place of work. Does anybody want to start? Maybe John, you started at least, as you said, in more the research side.
Yeah, I think that if I mean there's some things that we should distinguish between, right? Like a level 4 is a clinical designation for a unit, and that is separate from the academic environment. And so I think that now many academic places have level 4 units, but not all of them. And that's something to know. I think that the more important thing is not necessarily, I mean, it's important where you'll be clinically engaged, but if you're thinking about an independently funded career with external funding, then that's where like the degree of academic support matters, and that has nothing to do necessarily with the level of the unit. So in that regard, I guess what I would say is really trying to get information and insight into the ways in which those who intend to go in an academic direction are supported with things like, clinical coordinator support, funding that can help you start out, the amount of time protection you may have while you're waiting to get your grant that will cover more of your salary. Like those are all the important details to think about that. And that's different from the level of the unit itself. I guess the only thing that I would say though is because the person who asked the question said clinical research, I suppose some of that will have to do with like what is the clinical infrastructure that would exist to support the areas of interest that you have. And so if you are really interested in like clinical research and like neuroscience, then you want to make sure that there's like a strong neuroscience program that would go along with that. We have a lot of people that are interested in BPD and chronic lung. And so there's a lot of places with like large chronic lung programs. And so sometimes if there's a level 4 unit that has a developed clinical program that would be adjunctive to what your academic interests are, then that can be a resource. But that's like a very unique thing that you would have to think about as it relates to your intentions. And then the final thing I'll say is, depending on how much you're preparing for a specific direction around academic engagement, you might need like additional training. And so thinking about whether or not there's a graduate school that you might need to spend some time in, if you haven't finished all of that by the end of fellowship, or get additional degrees, and that's going to be part of how you write your training grant. Those are all the things to think about. But that is very distinct from like the level that there's level 4 units that have none of that. And then there's level 3 units that have all of that. And so I think that's how I would make sure you think about those things.
I think that was a great review. Thank you, John. Because I think don't forget there are level 4s that are private practice that are doing research, just maybe not the same way as you're thinking maybe is done at CHOP, for example. But I think there's a lot of great opportunities everywhere that you can go. I personally also work at a level 4 and a level 3, and we do not the same academic work, but we do academic work and clinical work specifically focused on QI more in our level 3, but we are able to do a wide variety of things. Did anybody else have anything to add on that?
I completely agree with John's distinction about, like level 4 is a clinical designation versus academic. I think one question that I get from a lot of my graduates is like, I need to go to Minnesota. Minnesota doesn't have an academic job. I want an academic job eventually. I'm gonna have to take a private practice job. How do I make myself like, can I get back? And sometimes it's the other way around, where like they start academic and they say, I might want to go private practice. And it's not actually necessarily true that like if you go academic, you're really attractive to private practice, because sometimes with an academic place, you don't do that much service, and then a private practice is looking for a workhorse, and they're like, you're soft, and we don't actually want you. But I think for the specific question of can you go academic after private practice, totally. But you need to show that you are still interested in academic pursuits while you're in private practice. So you kind of have to do a lot of work and like contact the academic institution in your neighborhood, or maybe stay involved with research projects that you were involved with in fellowship, but in some way, like keep your foot in the academic door. Try to be productive if you can actually get things published, but like definitely have a record that you can point to that says, I am still interested in this stuff. I've still been working on it, even in my current place, and I'm going to be able to pick up right where I left off when I get back to academia.
I'll just say that's another great plug for connecting in the different sections and organizations that are part of the section of neonatal perinatal medicine. For example, TCAN is putting this together. We really help to support different projects and get people to really continue to gain on their skills. For example, we have a QI curriculum that goes around. We have educational products. All of those things as ways to kind of keep yourself connected, even if you're not doing an academic specific job or working at an academic center. So I think those are good distinctions to have. Did anybody else have anything to share? I thought that was an excellent response. So let's answer a little more about the concept of what are you looking for in the job, what should you be known for, how can fellows really show that they are interested in an academic job. So what are some things that you look for in any fellows or even any early career applicants who are trying to join your center? What are some things that you really look for in those applicants? I'll start with Emily.
That's a great question. And I think it's becoming a theme. It really is dependent year to year what we're looking for, to be totally honest. Like our most recent hire was had focused her entire fellowship on POCUS. And, we had developed a fellowship training program, but most of our faculty had very little POCUS expertise. And so having somebody on faculty who could really support trainees and develop like a division-wide program was incredibly important for us to stay relevant. And so that was our focus that year. But it changed, but this next year it's not going to be that. So, and sometimes we need somebody who's more heavily clinical, and sometimes we can support somebody who is working towards an NIH grant. And that all depends less on our division and more at the institutional level about what they are willing to fund. So I think that's where those conversations, the loose connections, become really important. Reaching out to people that you know, even if they're not somebody in leadership at the institution. Generally, we are a smaller division than CHOP or many of the other bigger divisions represented here, but we all generally kind of know what our needs are year to year, or who the right people are to talk about that. And so those connections can make a real difference in finding the right placement for institutions.
Awesome. Thank you. Morgan?
Thinking about how to answer this question, I actually think what's really important to start with is what is most important to you and what kind of job do you want? And what are the things that are like absolute must-haves? What are the things that you're willing to be flexible on and negotiate, and then go from there? Because I think, right, really to Emily's point is, you might be looking for this perfect dream job at this institution that you so desire to be at. But if they don't have those sets of opportunities available for you or those types of openings, that might not be the right place for you. And that's okay, right? So I think you have to start with like, what is the job that you want? And or rate what is the location and place you want to be in, and then decide what we're willing to kind of play give and take on, and where are you willing to be flexible. And right, so say for example, if you're like, I really need to be, as Beanie was giving this example, in this location, then kind of use your connections and find out what are they looking for there, how can you help fill a void there and a need in their division, and what are you willing to say yes to, that is going to be part of your job and your life, versus you have a very specific research focus and effort, and you have to absolutely go somewhere where you're able to do that, right? That might kind of expand your horizons in the places that you go. So I actually think it's really just appropriate to start with you and thinking about the things that are going to make you really happy in your job, and then kind of branch out from there.
That's excellent advice. Thank you, Morgan. John, do you have anything to add?
No, I think Morgan said it well. I think that, thinking about what's important to you is, number one. And then also though, I think there's a great value in being adaptable. And it's not to say that like you say that you want to do something you have no interest in. I mean, that's not fair to yourself. But I do think that, um, I don't know that we did this in the beginning, but if we all went around, I'm sure that we're in different places than we imagined when we finished. And so like the process of formation doesn't end at the end of fellowship. I think it continues into your career. And so having like some openness to the ways in which you might be able to learn something new or become or like serve some important role. And it shouldn't be the case that like 90% of what you're doing has no interest to you, but there's probably going to be like 10 to 15% of any job that like you just have to do the thing for the division because that's what they need. And so that's a piece of it. But I think the one common thing that is true in all of neonatal jobs though is that we're all clinicians in some aspect of what we do. And so like focusing on becoming like a really capable clinician is the thing that we can say for anyone in fellowship, but then also having some aspect of the field that you care a lot about and you can point to the things that you've done in fellowship that sort of demonstrate that. I think that that's what a lot of places are looking at, acknowledging that like we talk all the time about the team. And so based on, I think what Emily said is really good. Like sometimes the team needs somebody that's going to do one thing. And if you're not the person that does that thing, like it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what the team needs kind of thing. So, and that's not anything that you can control. And so I wouldn't worry about that.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Christy or Beanie, did you have anything to add?
No, it's actually good to hear you guys say this because a lot of times we've really been trying to, and some people in my division, as we mentor our graduating fellows, talk about like find your niche, find the thing that's going to make you marketable. But to to John's point, I actually just had the end of year meetings with the fellows, and some and mo if not most are still trying to find their way. Like they like a lot of different things, and I always pull out my CV from or my cover letter from the beginning because I'm like I know this is like ideal that you really know what you're going to do and this is going to be your path. But I mean, I worked in a basic science lab. I did some of this. I did some of like so. It is okay to take that time and being willing to be exposed to things and doing what you need to do for your division and the place you want to be or the place that feels right. So yeah, it's actually really nice to hear that everybody reinforcing that too, because I really focused on that with our trainees recently.
Awesome, thank you. We're almost out of time today, but to wrap up, I wanted to see if I could ask everybody to give one question that you think the fellows, or again, early careers should ask during the interview that you think is really going to help them either learn about the job, the division, or just a way to kind of really think about what is going on with this job search. Mm. Everybody's thinking hard, so whenever somebody's ready, you can jump on.
I like asking about turnover. I think it's a good way to gauge whether people are happy without outright asking them whether they're happy. And then, if people have left, ask why, because there are very reasonable or like totally legitimate reasons to leave a job that don't mean that you hate it. But if a lot of people have left recently, maybe think twice.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, I was gonna say like try and understand like if you're meeting with somebody that's been there forever, ask them why they haven't left. And then if you're can get insight into people that have left and trying to find out why. But that's kind of repeating what Beanie just said. So I owe you something more unique. So I guess the other thing that I'd think about is like getting some insight into how decisions are made at the divisional level, and to what degree there's sort of um, input and consideration. I think that I have been grateful to be in a place that has a very healthy approach to leadership, where it really is like a collective discussion. And I mean, there's some things that just have to be decided sometimes, but I do think that um, places where you can feel even from the beginning like you have some control over whether it's your time or like anything, any aspect of something that's important to you, I think is the thing that, coming back to work-life balance and some of these questions like that, that's the thing that's going to make the biggest difference. But you can't have control over everything, but you can at least get some insight into how much people feel they have control over the things that matter to them.
I think depending on your interests and what your career goals are, it's really helpful to also ask how are you able to buy protected time for yourself and what you're able to get protected time for, right? It is very variable among different divisions in terms of how much protected time you might get for a program leadership or medical director role, for example. And so being very transparent and asking those things up front, I think to say, okay, like what could my life look like maybe in 5 or 10 years? How am I able to get protected time for myself and kind of what opportunities might I have could be helpful too.
I would say asking about what are the things that the individual faculty members really enjoy most about the division or what they would improve, almost like you would during like fellowship interviews. And if you get a fairly generic answer, sorry, fairly generic answer or a really beautiful that can really kind of shape. You can go to get the feeling of the culture of a place or how people are treated.
I'm just going to highlight that everybody said to ask questions about the culture, which I just think is so important. Like the people that you work with day in, there's a lot of good neonatology jobs out there. There's a lot of, and there's a lot of different kinds of neonatology jobs out there that you can create to make your own. But the people that you work with are so important to your day in, day out happiness. Your division chief has a lot of impact. So does your medical director and the people, other people in leadership about what that looks like and the relationships between the like other staff, the nurses, the APs. We have a ton of unions. We're going through a lot of union negotiations right now, and it's been so divisive. And yet our division is like so strong in the relationship that we have with each other. And I just really think that when it comes down to it, culture is a lot of what's going to make you happy or unhappy in your job, regardless of whether it's academic, private practice, any of those things. And so figuring out those little questions that can really bring that out, is what I think is going to be most helpful in your interview process, along with all of the protected time and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much to everybody. I just want to thank everybody again for joining us today, or if you're listening to this recording, thank you so much. I want to thank all of our panelists. I'm just going to quickly share again, we have some future sessions coming up for the panel. On the 17th is that panel that I was talking about, the transitioning jobs as an early career faculty member. So August 17th, take a look and register if you can. We still have a couple that are still being in the works for scheduling. It's been difficult just with the transition to a new academic year, but we're still working on some interviewing tips with an early career faculty panel, specifically focusing on visa and the jobs search, co-sponsored with the RAIN group. And then we also will have contract negotiations. Trying to see if anybody had any last minute questions, but it looks like not. So I was going to end this panel. Thank you guys so much again for joining us today, and I hope everybody has a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.